A woman found lifeless in Bloomsbury Square, yet her tea still warm. Welcome to Midnight Confessions. I am your host, Elderwick. This community is incredible. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Your voices make every mystery come alive. Let's begin. The rain had been falling since morning, a relentless, silvery drizzle that blurred the tall Georgian windows of the Langford residence on Bloomsbury Square. Inside, the chandeliers shone warmly, their light reflected in the polished mahogany and crystal decanters. It was the evening of Lady Eleanor Langford's musical salon, an event renowned in London society for its taste, exclusivity, and, as fate would decree, its tragedy. At precisely 9 o'clock, as the quartet played the final bars of Mozart, Lady Eleanor rose to make her toast. She was a woman of poise and precision, never a hair out of place, never a word uttered without calculation. Her hand trembled slightly as she raised her glass, though whether from age or anticipation, no one could say. "To friendship," she declared with a faint smile, "and to truth, however elusive it may be." The guests laughed softly, clinking their glasses. There were perhaps 20 of them. The elite and the artistic, gathered amid orchids and champagne. Among them stood her nephew, Charles Langford, a handsome young man of restless energy. Miss Beatrice Vale, the pianist whose career Lady Eleanor had patronized. Dr. Henry March, the family physician, and Mrs. Agatha Redfern, Lady Eleanor's lifelong companion and secretary. The toast was drunk, the music resumed, and 5 minutes later, Lady Eleanor Langford was dead. She collapsed gracefully, almost elegantly, her glass slipping from her hand. It shattered on the marble floor, and the sharp sound silenced the laughter. For one breathless moment, everyone stared, and then the cries began. Dr. March rushed forward, knelt beside her, checked her pulse, and looked up with a grim expression. "It's too late," he murmured. "She's gone." Panic rippled through the room. Someone whispered that she had been unwell, another that it was shock, but Miss Vale, pale and trembling, cried out suddenly, "Her lips, they're blue! Oh my God, she's been poisoned." The word hung in the air like a curse. Poisoned. Within the hour, the police had arrived. The guests were kept in the drawing room, the servants questioned. Superintendent Radley of Scotland Yard was a competent man, practical, blunt, and unimpressed by the fashionable hysteria of Bloomsbury Square. He took statements, examined the glass, and muttered something about cyanide. It was, he thought, a simple matter. The poison had been in her champagne, the murderer among those present. And yet, as the night deepened and the gas lamps outside hissed softly in the mist, a telegram was sent, at the insistence of Mrs. Redfern, to a certain Belgian detective residing quietly at Whitehaven Mansions. It read simply, "Urgent, Lady Eleanor Langford, dead. Suspected poisoning. Police baffled. Beg you to come at once. Agatha Redfern." At 8:30 the following morning, Hercule Poirot arrived at Bloomsbury Square. He stepped from his cab with his customary precision, immaculate in a dark grey suit, umbrella in one hand and gloves in the other. The constable on duty stared as the small, fastidious man surveyed the house with a critical eye. "Ah," said Poirot softly, "a most respectable address, but perhaps beneath the surface, some disarray, n'est-ce pas?" Inside, Superintendent Radley awaited him with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. "Morning, Monsieur Poirot. I suppose you'll want to see the body." Poirot inclined his head. "If you please. But first, a little order, if you will permit. The drawing-room where the tragedy occurred." Radley led the way. The room was untouched, crystal glasses, abandoned fans, and the faint scent of jasmine. Poirot walked slowly, observing each object with his peculiar intensity. He paused before the broken glass, its fragments carefully collected on a tray. "This," he murmured, "was hers?" Yes, Radley said. Poison in the residue. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. And yet, only one glass among 20. A most particular death, mon cher. Someone wished her gone, and no other. He turned, studying the room. The arrangement of chairs, the lingering expressions of fear on the faces of those he would soon question. Very well, he said softly. We shall see, Superintendent, whether it was truly poison that killed Lady Langford, or the poisoner's mind. Superintendent Radley had arranged the household in the morning room, a sober space overlooking the square where the plane trees bowed under last night's rain. Poirot stood just inside the threshold, hands tucked behind his back, head bent a fraction as though listening for the note that would tune an orchestra. Mrs. Agatha Redfern sat bolt upright on the edge of a chair. The young nephew, Charles Langford, prowled from window to fireplace with the suppressed vigor of a man who feels a situation ought to be acted upon rather than endured. Miss Beatrice Vale, wan and finely composed, clasped her music satchel so tightly the kid leather pitted beneath her nails. Dr. Henry March hovered close to the sideboard as if reluctant to be too far from the practical comfort of the teapot. A maid, Elsie, Radley supplied later in a murmured aside, remained by the door, eyes darting. Poirot did not address them at once. He crossed to the mantel, adjusted one of the twin ormolu clocks so it stood precisely symmetrical with its partner, and only then inclined his head. Mesdames, Messieurs, it is the wish of the police that we remain calm and exact. We will speak one at a time. Before that, I ask you all to think, not of the tragedy as a story to be told with drama and exclamation, but as a succession of the small facts, les détails, that are the footprints of truth. A little shiver went through the room. Radley, who had been poised to begin his own brusque questions, folded his notebook with a grunt and gestured for Poirot to proceed. Last night, Poirot said gently, Lady Eleanor gave a toast. Champagne was poured for all. Of these 20 glasses, only one was prepared separately? Charles turned at once. Aunt Eleanor preferred it from the small bottle. She always did, said it kept the fizz better. Reeves, the butler, fetched one from the conservatory cabinet. The conservatory? Poirot's brows rose. A curious place for wine. Mrs. Redfern answered, voice low. Lady Eleanor kept a cabinet there for small gatherings. The orchids must be tended, and she liked to entertain where they could be admired. She had the cabinet moved there 2 summers ago. Bien, and Reeves poured for her from the small bottle. Under my eye, said Dr. March with a doctor's calm certainty. I was at the table nearest the door, conversing with Mrs. Redfern when Reeves brought it in. He uncorked it, poured a measure into Lady Eleanor's flute, and returned the bottle to the tray. There was no possibility of substitution. Poirot's gaze lingered on Dr. March a heartbeat longer than courtesy demanded. You are precise, Doctor. It is good. Now, Miss Vale, you were at the piano. Miss Vale's fingers tightened. After the toast. Before that, we stood together, Lady Eleanor and I, because she wished to announce something about my performances next season. The young woman's throat worked. I suppose it no longer matters to say. On the contrary, Poirot replied, it matters greatly. Words withheld are the best friends of misunderstanding. What was the announcement? That she would. Miss Vale glanced at Charles and then at Mrs. Redfern. That she would continue to sponsor me. There had been uncertainty. Charles gave a short, almost involuntary laugh. Aunt Eleanor adored a formal flourish. Even her favors were arranged like tableaux. Mrs. Redfern did not smile. There was also to be a statement about certain charities. Lady Eleanor had been revising her commitments. Revising, Poirot echoed softly, a word that can create many anxieties. He paced a step, small and neat, as though not to disturb the rug's pattern. Monsieur Charles, forgive me. You are the principal heir. Charles's eyes flicked to Radley, then back. So I have been led to expect. Mrs. Redfern's thin hands folded more tightly. Lady Eleanor had not yet signed the final draft. A silence followed this simple sentence. It was filled at once by the whisper of rain and the creak of Elsie's shoes. Poirot did not look at Charles. He looked instead at the maid. "Elsie, you assisted last night?" "Yes, sir." Her words tumbled out. "I carried in the tray after Reeves poured. I took the empty decanter from the sideboard. There were two, and then I stood by the door while the gentleman played." "The gentleman?" "The quartet," Mrs. Redfern corrected, faintly exasperated. "Pardon," Elsie murmured. Poirot continued as if no correction had been made. "And you saw Reeves open the small bottle?" "Yes, sir. He took the cork out with the little silver thing, screw-like, and then he sniffed it. He said, 'Very good, my lady,' and poured. Bon, Superintendent, may I see Reeves?" Radley, who had gone to fetch the butler earlier, returned now with a tall, grave man whose hair had retreated discreetly from his temples. Reeves answered in a measured baritone. The cabinet in the conservatory was locked. He alone had the key, which hung upon a ring with others. No, there had been nothing amiss when he fetched the bottle. The seal intact, the label proper. He placed the opened bottle back upon the tray. Yes, and later he had removed it at the doctor's instruction when Lady Eleanor— Reeves paused, swallowing, when the calamity occurred. Poirot inclined his head gravely. "You are sure the bottle you opened was one you had placed there yourself?" "Entirely, sir. I keep the cabinet stocked. A case arrived 3 days prior from Lady Eleanor's usual merchant." "Was any other person in the conservatory unobserved last evening?" "Not that I saw." Reeves' composure did not crack, but his eyelids flickered. "Except, there was a moment when I went to find the gardener about the stove for the orchids. The flame had gone higher than it should." Radley's pencils scraped at once. "Who tends that stove?" "Mr. Pettigrew. He left at 10, as usual." "And between your departure and return?" Poirot asked. "The conservatory door remained." "Unlocked, sir, but the cabinet was locked." Reeves allowed himself a thread of pride. "I am exact in such matters." Poirot nodded. "Exactitude is a virtue, until one meets a mind more exact still." He turned, taking in the arrangement of anxious faces. "Let us establish the simple path. A sealed bottle is opened before witnesses. A glass is poured and delivered. 5 minutes pass. Lady Eleanor collapses. Doctor, if it is cyanide, the odor of bitter almonds. Did you perceive it?" Dr. March hesitated. "Faintly. It can be difficult. Not all people detect it. The symptoms align. There was a sudden gasp, a flushing, then the lips. Well, I instructed Reeves to remove the bottle lest others be endangered." "A sensible precaution," Poirot said. "But it removes also an object of interest from the sight of many. Curiosity, it is a natural thing. When a tragedy occurs, people look. Yet no one looked closely at the bottle once it returned to the tray." Charles's impatience broke. "If you suspect Reeves, I suspect the arrangement," Poirot said mildly. "When the routine is exact, one can hide a deviation inside it as neatly as a seed under the soil." Mrs. Redfern exhaled, the sound crisp as paper. "You speak in metaphors, Monsieur Poirot. What do you propose to do?" "To see the cabinet," he answered. "To smell the orchids. To observe who is most at home among them." He led the way, and they trailed after him through the corridor toward the bright green spill of the conservatory. Light lay there in watery bands, plants rising from terracotta and glazed bowls. A thin ribbon of warmth quivered above the little black stove. Poirot paused just inside, his gaze moving from the damp leaves to the glass-fronted cabinet on its iron stand. He approached it without touching, bending to examine the keyhole, the scuffs on the floor, the faint ring a bottle leaves when set down with habitual precision. "Superintendent," he said in a low voice, "you will send the opened bottle to your laboratory." "Yes." "But look, If you please, at the shelf, do you see how one space is clean where the dust should be? A bottle rested there recently and did not return to that place. Radley bent, grunted. Huh. And see here, this second shelf has a label removed. The gum remains sticky. Poirot's eyes were bright. Someone knew which was the small bottle shelf. Someone interfered with the order of things. He straightened, watched the reflection of his own small figure in the glass, and then turned to face them. There is a mind in this house that enjoys arrangement as much as I do. It has made a pattern and waited for us to admire it. We will oblige, slowly. He let his gaze rest upon each face, not accusing, not absolving, merely attentive. Now, he said, we shall talk of charities and revisions, of debts and instruments, of who walked where in the 5 minutes between a toast to truth and the arrival of death. One of you is impatient for us to follow the obvious. I dislike the obvious. He smiled, and it did not reach his eyes. It is so rarely true. Poirot lingered in the conservatory long after the others had retreated to the hall. The air was thick with the perfume of orchids, a sweetness that might once have seemed delicate but now felt oppressive, as if the flowers themselves conspired to keep their secrets. He examined each surface with his usual delicacy, his gloved fingers hovering over a stray petal, his eyes following the faint trail of condensation that curled along the inside of a wineglass left on a nearby shelf. Every trace, every mark spoke of order, an order so deliberate that it betrayed its artificer. "Superintendent," he said finally, his voice quiet, "our poisoner is no brute. No rage, no haste. This is the work of one who loves perfection, who perhaps, like me, cannot bear disorder." Radley gave a short laugh. "A madman, then?" Poirot shook his head. "Ah, no, madness is untidy. This is symmetry." He knelt beside the cabinet again, pulling from his pocket a small magnifying lens. The residue where the label had been torn away glistened faintly under the morning light. "The gum is new," he murmured. "The change was made but yesterday. The question is, what label did our murderer wish us to see and which to forget?" Radley frowned. "We'll trace the bottle numbers with the merchant. That'll give us something solid. We, the physical trail, but I—" Poirot tapped his temple lightly. "I prefer the psychological one. Tell me, Superintendent, when you questioned the guests, who seemed most relieved to speak? Who most eager to be believed?" Radley hesitated. "The doctor was confident, the nephew impatient. The secretary, Mrs. Redfern, seemed anxious for you to come, and the pianist, Miss Vale, could barely hold herself together." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, Miss Vale, the protégée. Gratitude and resentment, those are cousins, you know. We must not confuse them." They returned to the morning room. The atmosphere had grown taut. Each suspect had adopted a mask of composure, but beneath it Poirot sensed the tremor of fear. He moved to the hearth, warming his hands briefly before turning to Mrs. Redfern. "Madame, you were Lady Eleanor's companion for how long?" 20 years, she said, pride and exhaustion mingling in her voice. "I managed her correspondence, her engagements, her charities. She trusted me completely. Naturellement, and yet she had been revising her will, I think." Mrs. Redfern stiffened. "That is hardly a crime." "Indeed not, but it is a motive, perhaps. Did you know the contents of the new draft?" "I prepared the documents," she admitted. "Lady Eleanor was meticulous, as you might imagine. There were to be slight alterations. Small bequests to certain staff, a renewed endowment for Miss Vale's musical foundation, and a reduction in Charles's inheritance." Charles stopped pacing. "Reduction? You make it sound like she intended to leave me nothing." Mrs. Redfern's tone sharpened. "Not nothing, but less. She felt you were, how shall I put it, imprudent." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, la jeunesse. It spends tomorrow's money today." Charles flushed. I don't deny I've debts. But to poison her, that's absurd. She was the only family I had. Poirot raised a hand gently. Murder, monsieur, is often committed not by hatred, but by desperation. Yet I make no accusation, I listen only. He turned next to Miss Vale. Mademoiselle, Lady Eleanor's patronage. Was it generous? Miss Vale hesitated, her fingers trembling against her satchel. It was everything. She believed in me when no one else did. But lately she had changed. Cold. Critical. She hinted that she might withdraw her support. Then, last night she told me she would not. Poirot tilted his head. You mean she would continue? Yes, she whispered. She smiled, said she could never abandon me. I felt so relieved, and then, her voice faltered, and then she was gone. Poirot studied her quietly. So, gratitude, not anger. But tell me, mademoiselle, in that moment, before she drank, did she look at anyone in particular? Miss Vale frowned, thinking. She looked toward Mrs. Redfern, I think, almost as if she were warning her. Mrs. Redfern's eyes widened. Nonsense! Poirot merely nodded. Perhaps not. Dr. March had been silent, standing slightly apart, his hands clasped behind his back. Poirot turned to him. Doctor, forgive me. You're a man of science. I'm curious. How long would cyanide take to act? Seconds, March replied briskly. She'd have felt the burn in her throat, the dizziness, the convulsion. Instantaneous, near enough. Then, Poirot said softly, the poison must have been in the glass already when she lifted it. No opportunity after. That's right, said Radley, which leaves Reeves. Reeves inclined his head. Superintendent, I swear by my honor. Poirot interrupted, voice silk smooth. There is no honor without opportunity, my good man, and no guilt without intention. You will forgive me if I consider both. He paced slowly across the rug, his reflection wavering in the polished floor. One bottle, opened under watchful eyes, yet only one glass was poisoned. A miracle of precision. I think perhaps our murderer is not content with crime alone. They also crave perfection. He stopped by the window, looking out toward the dripping trees. Lady Eleanor raised her glass to truth. I fancy someone in this room feared what truth she might reveal. Mrs. Redfern caught her breath. Reveal? What do you mean? Poirot turned. She was a woman of power, was she not? She knew the secrets of those she patronized. Money, affairs, reputations. Such knowledge is a weapon, no? Perhaps she intended to wield it last night. A silence followed, deeper than before. Even Radley, gruff and practical, felt the air tighten. Poirot let it linger, then said quietly, Superintendent, I would ask that none of our guests leave this house until tomorrow. The weather is poor, and so is my confidence in coincidence. Radley nodded, already issuing orders. Poirot looked once more around the room, the butler's strained dignity, the nephew's smouldering unease, the pianist's fragile calm, the secretary's rigid control. Each was a portrait of composure painted over fear. He smiled faintly to himself. Yes, he murmured, there is method here. Method and malice, wrapped together like the stems of those orchids. As the others dispersed under Radley's direction, Poirot lingered by the door. His gaze drifted back to the cabinet key now glinting on the butler's chain. So small a thing, he said under his breath, and yet perhaps it unlocks more than wine. That evening the house at Bloomsbury Square settled under a strange and uneasy quiet. The last of the policemen had finished their rounds, and the guests, now suspects, were confined to their rooms under Radley's stern watch. The rain had ceased, but its memory lingered in the streets, and the gas lights outside blurred in the mist like wavering sentinels. In the library, Poirot sat alone before the fire. his small form immaculate, his eyes half closed, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. He had eaten sparingly. His mind, not his appetite, demanded sustenance. On the low table beside him lay a collection of objects, a silver key ring belonging to Reeves, a fragment of torn wine label retrieved from the conservatory floor, and a delicate handkerchief embroidered with the initials B.V. Poirot regarded them as one might study musical notes, each contributing to a greater harmony yet to be heard. The door opened softly, and Superintendent Radley entered, looking more tired than usual. "Well, Monsieur Poirot, I hope you're getting somewhere, because I'm not. The analysis from the lab just came through, cyanide as suspected. Enough to kill a horse." Poirot nodded. "Naturellement. But the means of its introduction, that is the real riddle." Radley dropped into the armchair opposite. "If it was in the glass, it was poured there. Reeves swears he didn't tamper with it. Miss Vale never touched it. And from all accounts, Lady Eleanor didn't leave it out of her sight." Poirot leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "There is one small question, my friend. Who washed the glasses after the toast?" Radley blinked. "Washed? Why, the servants, I imagine." "Ah, but which servant?" "Reeves. No, the maid. Elsie. Reeves said she cleared them and sent them to the pantry." "Then we must ask," Poirot murmured, "if perhaps one glass was not quite empty." Radley frowned. "You think the poison wasn't in the champagne at all?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Let us not leap to conclusions, mon ami. But consider, a drop of liquid on the rim, a trace transferred from a sleeve, a handkerchief, a gloved hand. There are many ways to deliver death when one's intention is delicate." Before Radley could reply, a knock sounded. The maid herself stood hesitating at the door, twisting her apron. "Beg pardon, sir, but Miss Vale's taken ill. Fainting, she says. The doctor's with her." Poirot rose instantly, his sharp eyes brightening. "Come, Superintendent, this interests me greatly." Upstairs, Miss Beatrice Vale lay on a chaise by the window, pale but composed. Dr. March stood beside her, closing his medical bag. "Just exhaustion," he said briskly. "The girl's overwrought, that's all. I've given her something to help her sleep." Poirot's gaze rested on the doctor's hand as he replaced the vial. "You are most attentive, doctor, and yet if I may observe, you seem more anxious than your patient." March met his gaze coolly. "I'm anxious for the truth, same as you." "Indeed. Then you will not object if I ask one small question. The sedative, was it from your personal supply?" March stiffened slightly. "Yes, of course. I carry a few standard preparations." Poirot inclined his head, a gesture at once courteous and piercing. "I envy your preparedness. Tell me, you were Lady Eleanor's physician for many years?" 10 at least. "And you were aware of her revisions to her will?" The doctor hesitated. "She mentioned it, yes. But she didn't consult me about her private affairs." Poirot's tone softened. "No, perhaps not. But she did consult you about her health, n'est-ce pas? And yet, from your own account, she was in perfect condition last night." "That's true," March said curtly. "She had the constitution of a woman 20 years younger." Poirot turned his attention to Miss Vale. "Mademoiselle, you say you feel faint. Tell me, did you eat or drink anything after the toast?" She shook her head weakly. "Nothing. Only I touched her glass, just before she fell. I was helping to steady it as she laughed. A drop spilled on my hand." Poirot's expression changed subtly. "Ah, and afterward?" "I wiped it with my handkerchief." Her eyes widened as realization dawned. "Do you think—" "I think," Poirot said softly, "that handkerchief has much to tell us." Radley fetched it from the library where it had been placed among the items collected earlier. Poirot examined it under the lamplight, unfolding the delicate linen between his fingers. There, faint but distinct. A pale discoloration marred one corner. He held it close, sniffed delicately, and nodded. "Bitter almonds," he murmured. "The scent is faint, but it is there. The poison was not in the glass. It was on it." Radley swore softly. "So someone smeared it on the rim?" "Precisely. Cyanide dissolves easily. A trace on the rim would suffice. Lady Eleanor's glass alone was touched thus, and the hand that prepared it must have been both confident and deliberate." He turned to Miss Vale, his voice gentle. "You are fortunate, mademoiselle, that only a trace remained when you wiped your hand." March's jaw tightened. "Then who did it, man?" Reeves brought the glass directly to her. Poirot's gaze drifted toward the doctor, thoughtful, almost pitying. "Reeves poured, yes, but who handled the tray before that? Who might have assisted in arranging the glasses for the toast?" Radley rifled his notes. "Mrs. Redfern, according to Reeves. She supervised the serving herself." Poirot's smile was almost imperceptible. "Juste ciel. How convenient. The companion who arranged the glasses, the secretary who managed the will, the friend to whom Lady Eleanor entrusted all things." He turned to the doctor, then to the maid, then finally back to Miss Vale. "You see, Superintendent, what we have is not yet proof, but it is pattern." The clock struck midnight, and the fire in the grate hissed softly. Poirot folded the handkerchief with exquisite care. "Tomorrow, I think, we shall let our suspects rest. In the morning we will observe them anew. A murderer cannot live long in order. Sooner or later they disturb it, and when they do, I will be there to see." The morning came grey and heavy, with a dull mist clinging to the panes of Bloomsbury Square. The house, though grand, now felt as though it breathed uneasily, its corridors hushed, its servants whispering like shadows. Poirot rose early, impeccably dressed as always, his moustaches gleaming, his shoes reflecting the weekday light. He breakfasted sparingly on coffee and toast, his mind already arranged with precision for the day ahead. Superintendent Radley joined him at 8:30, looking rumpled and sour from lack of sleep. "They've all been kept in their rooms, as you asked," he said, seating himself with a grunt. "No one's spoken to anyone else, save the maid who took up trays." Poirot's eyes flickered. "Ah, isolation. It reveals as much as it conceals. When the social mask is not reinforced by company, the face beneath begins to show itself." Radley grunted again. "If only faces confessed as easily as you suggest." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, but they do, my friend. Only one must observe the small details. The restless pacing of Monsieur Langford, the suppressed composure of Madame Redfern, the trembling fingers of Mademoiselle Vale. They tell us what words would conceal." He rose, smoothing an invisible crease from his sleeve. "We shall begin again, one by one in the breakfast room. Let us invite them, not as suspects, but as guests. There is nothing so revealing as a false sense of safety." They began with Charles Langford. He entered briskly, dressed with more care than the previous day, but his confidence was brittle, his movements sharp with irritation. He sat down opposite Poirot, arms crossed. "Are we to repeat yesterday's inquisition, Monsieur Poirot?" "Not repeat, monsieur. Refine," Poirot replied calmly. "Tell me again, if you please, where you were just before the toast." "I was in the drawing-room, tuning the gramophone," Charles said shortly. "Aunt Eleanor was speaking with Miss Vale near the conservatory door. Reeves brought in the champagne, and I joined the others when she called for attention." Poirot's eyes lingered on him. "You are certain you did not pass near the tray of glasses before they were served?" "Quite certain." "And yet," Poirot murmured, "it is curious. Reeves recalls seeing a gentleman, he thought you, crossing the conservatory threshold only moments before he fetched the bottle. Could that be so?" Charles hesitated. "I might have stepped in to fetch a cigarette case I'd left by the settee, but that was all." "Mais oui, a small thing. Still, small things make the pattern." Poirot leaned back, his tone conversational. "Your aunt, she was reducing your inheritance. Did you know that?" Charles's jaw tightened. I'd heard rumors, from Mrs. Redfern mostly. "And you resented it?" "I resented being managed," he snapped. "Aunt Eleanor treated me like a schoolboy, every penny accounted for, every habit criticized. But resentment isn't murder." "No," Poirot agreed softly. "But it can lead one to imprudence. You gamble, do you not?" The younger man's eyes narrowed. "Who told you that?" "Ah, monsieur, the signs are there. The nervous hands, the unease when money is discussed. Lady Eleanor, she intended to protect you from yourself. A noble impulse, perhaps too noble." Poirot studied him a moment longer, then dismissed him with a courteous nod. "Thank you, that will be all." When the door closed, Radley exhaled. "You were hard on him." Poirot shrugged. "He is too quick to anger. But I do not think he is our poisoner. He acts without calculation, and this crime, Superintendent, is a composition of patience." Next came Mrs. Redfern. She entered with her habitual precision, a woman composed of starch and suppressed feeling. Her morning attire was immaculate, though her eyes were rimmed with fatigue. She sat straight-backed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Madame Redfern," Poirot began gently. "You were closest to Lady Eleanor, were you not?" "Yes," she said, her voice controlled. "I managed her affairs. She relied upon me, absolutely." "And yet," he said, "she was preparing to change her will, reducing your bequest as well as her nephew's." A flicker crossed her expression, almost imperceptible. That was her prerogative. I would have remained with her regardless. "Ah, loyalty," Poirot said softly. "It is a fine quality, until it is wounded." Her composure trembled, then hardened. "You think I killed her because she wished to make alterations to her will? You mistake me, Monsieur Poirot. I'm not driven by money." "Perhaps not," he murmured. "But by fear, maybe." Lady Eleanor was fond of truth, as she said in her final toast. I wonder, what truth did she intend to reveal that night? Mrs. Redfern's face paled. "You have no right." Poirot lifted a hand. "No right, perhaps. But she looked at you when she raised her glass. Miss Vale noticed it. It was not chance. She intended something, madame, and perhaps you knew it." Her silence was more telling than denial. When she finally rose, her voice was thin, controlled. "You will find your murderer elsewhere, Monsieur Poirot. I have nothing to hide." Poirot watched her go, his expression unreadable. "Ah," he murmured to Radley, "there speaks the voice of dignity under siege." Last came Reeves, the butler. His calm seemed unshakable as he stood before them, hands clasped, eyes respectful, but wary. "You wish to see me again, sir?" Poirot nodded. "Yes, Reeves. Yesterday you said the cabinet key is always in your keeping." "That's correct. And yet last night when I examined it, there were faint scratches about the lock, as though another had tried it recently." Reeves' face tightened. "Impossible. No one else possesses that key." "Except, perhaps," Poirot said softly, "someone who copied it. Tell me, Reeves, how long has Mrs. Redfern had access to the household keys?" "She often requested them, sir, for inventory or inspection, but she always returned them." Poirot inclined his head. "Toujours. Always order, always precision. Yes, she would return them, after taking a mold, perhaps." Radley frowned. "That's speculation." "Oui, exactement," Poirot agreed. "But sometimes speculation is the seed of truth. Reeves, you may go." When they were alone again, Radley muttered, "So you think the secretary did it?" Poirot gazed toward the window, where the mist had thinned to a faint, cold light. "I think, my friend, that Lady Eleanor discovered deceit within her household, a theft perhaps, or a betrayal. She intended to expose it, but someone, fearing disgrace, struck first." He rose, smoothing his jacket with deliberate care. The stage is set, the actors assembled. Soon the curtain will rise, and the murderer, whether ready or not, will take their bow. The afternoon light slanted weakly through the high windows, striking the gilt frames and drawing pale ribbons of brightness across the carpet. Poirot stood near the mantel, his small figure immaculate, his eyes fixed upon the portrait of Lady Eleanor above the hearth. Her painted face seemed to regard him with distant irony, serene, elegant, and secretive, even in death. "Ah, madame," he murmured softly, "you were a woman who valued appearances, were you not? Even in murder, your world remains symmetrical." He turned at the sound of the door. It was Miss Beatrice Vale, her complexion still pale but her composure steadier than the night before. She carried herself with a new tension, fragile dignity barely concealing fear. Poirot motioned her to sit, his manner gentle but alert. "Mademoiselle, I thank you for coming," he said. "I regret to disturb you again, but truth, you see, does not rest politely. It knocks, sometimes, at the least convenient moment." She smiled faintly, her voice a whisper. "I doubt any of us will rest until this is over." Poirot inclined his head. "Just so. Now, I wish to speak of the moments before the toast. You recall them clearly?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I think so. Lady Eleanor was in good spirits. She had spoken with Mrs. Redfern about some final details of her charities. She asked me to play after the toast. I remember the look in her eyes. It was—" She paused, searching for the word. "Triumphant, almost." "Triumphant," Poirot repeated softly. "As one who has accomplished something at last." "Yes, or who was about to." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Très bien. You see, mademoiselle, every emotion leaves its trace, just as surely as a fingerprint on glass. You have been most observant. I thank you." She looked down, twisting a fold of her skirt between trembling fingers. "Do you truly think Mrs. Redfern capable of such a thing?" Poirot folded his hands. "Capable? Yes. Whether she did it, that I do not yet know, but she is a woman of control, of meticulous habits. The act, if hers, would have been planned with great care. Yet I wonder—" He broke off suddenly, eyes narrowing. "Tell me, Miss Vale, when you touched the poisoned glass, did you notice anything unusual? A residue, perhaps, or a scent?" She frowned in concentration. "Only that it felt slightly sticky, like syrup. I thought perhaps it was from the champagne." Poirot's gaze glinted. "Sticky, yes. Bon. That is most helpful. It suggests not cyanide in its pure form, but a compound, one easily handled without fear. Perhaps a preparation of bitter almond oil." She stared at him, bewildered. "Then, who could have made such a thing?" Poirot smiled very slightly. "A physician, par example, or one with access to a laboratory. Someone like Dr. March, perhaps." Miss Vale caught her breath. "But the doctor, he's been so kind, so certain of the facts." "Too certain, perhaps," Poirot interrupted gently. "He observed everything, corrected everyone, and yet I saw, when I spoke of the sedative you took last night, a shadow pass over his face. He does not like surprises." There was a quiet knock at the door. Radley entered, holding a small envelope sealed with wax. "From Scotland Yard," he said. "Report on the fingerprints found on the bottle and glasses." Poirot accepted it delicately, slit the seal with a silver blade, and scanned the contents. His brows lifted. "Tiens, tiens. Curious indeed." Radley leaned forward. "Well, what is it?" Poirot's tone was calm, almost detached. There were 3 sets of prints on Lady Eleanor's glass. Hers, naturally. The butler's. And, most intriguingly, those of Dr. March. Radley blinked. But he never handled the glass. By his own account. "Precisely," Poirot murmured. "He said he examined it after her death, yes?" but the prints show no smudge, no overlapping trace of movement. They were impressed before she drank. Our good doctor's hands, it seems, were there before his words were. The revelation hung in the air. Poirot's gaze moved from Radley to Miss Vale, who looked stricken, her voice trembling. "You mean Dr. March poisoned her?" Poirot spread his hands. "Doucement, mademoiselle. We must not leap, but it grows clearer. Lady Eleanor trusted him completely. Perhaps she had begun to suspect that his attentions, professional or otherwise, were not entirely pure. She was a proud woman. She would have confronted him publicly, perhaps even at that very gathering. If so, voila, a motive both powerful and personal." Radley swore under his breath. "I'll have him brought in at once." Poirot stopped him with a raised finger. "No, let him come to us. Let him believe himself still unsuspected. I would see how a guilty man behaves when he thinks the curtain has not yet risen." Later, when Dr. March entered the drawing-room, Poirot greeted him with his usual cordiality. "Ah, Doctor, your assistance yesterday was invaluable. You have, I think, the gift of precision." March inclined his head. "I do my best. Has there been progress?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A little. We have learned, for instance, that Lady Eleanor's glass bore your fingerprints." The doctor froze, then forced a short laugh. "Of course it did. I examined it for residue, as I told you." Poirot's voice was smooth as silk. "After her death, yes. Yet the prints lie beneath hers, not above. A small detail, but I am, you know, a lover of small details." A silence stretched. March's face drained of color. "That's impossible," he said hoarsely. Poirot regarded him steadily, his tone now almost tender. "Impossible? Perhaps. Or perhaps you wiped the rim with something that carried the poison. A handkerchief, perhaps. You see, my dear doctor, order can deceive. But the truth, toujours, it insists upon symmetry." March took an involuntary step back. "You have no proof." "Not yet," Poirot agreed softly. "But I shall have it soon." He glanced toward Radley, who stood by the door, tense as a drawn bow. "Let the house remain as it is, Superintendent. No one leaves. By tomorrow I shall show you not only who killed Lady Eleanor Langford, but why." As March turned sharply and strode from the room, Poirot's gaze followed him, the faintest sigh escaping his lips. "So," he murmured, "the pattern begins to unfold. But even now there is one thread still hidden, one act of mercy or betrayal that changes everything." The tension that followed Dr. March's departure lingered in the air like the last note of a discordant symphony. Poirot remained standing, gazing after him with that still, penetrating calm that both unnerved and fascinated those who watched him work. The silence in the drawing-room seemed to expand until even the faint ticking of the mantel clock grew oppressive. Radley broke it first. "You've got him cornered, Poirot. His fingerprints, his evasions. He's the man, sure as daylight." Poirot turned slightly, a faint ironic smile lifting the edge of his mustache. "Ah, mon ami, daylight is a fine thing, but it can dazzle the eyes as easily as it reveals the truth. No, we are not yet at the summit. We climb still." Radley frowned. "Then what are you waiting for?" "For the murderer to betray himself," Poirot said simply. "They always do. Pride, fear, conscience, it matters not. Which? Each drives the hand to a mistake." As he spoke, the door opened again and Mrs. Redfern entered, pale and composed, her face a mask of dignity. She carried in her hand a small folded note. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her tone steady, "this was slipped beneath my door just now. I thought it best to bring it directly to you." Poirot accepted the paper delicately, his brows rising as he unfolded it. The handwriting was firm and masculine. "Meet me in the conservatory at 6. I can explain everything." "H.M." "H.M.," Radley muttered. "Henry March." Poirot's eyes glinted. Indeed, A summons to confession or to another trap? Mrs. Redfern clasped her hands tightly. Do you mean he intends harm? Perhaps to himself, Poirot replied. Or perhaps he hopes to silence another before the truth can be spoken. Either way, madame, we shall attend this meeting, but on our terms. As the hour approached, Poirot took his place in the conservatory. The orchids gleamed faintly under the pale light, their beauty almost indecent in the hush of expectation. The rain had begun again, tapping lightly against the glass panes. Radley stood hidden behind the door, his revolver drawn, though Poirot had insisted it was unlikely to be needed. Dr. March arrived precisely at 6, his step brisk, his face drawn but resolute. He stopped short upon seeing Poirot waiting there, his composure faltering for an instant before he forced a smile. You're punctual, Monsieur Poirot. I admire punctuality, Poirot said pleasantly. It speaks of discipline, and discipline, I think, has guided you much of your life. March's eyes darted once toward the far end of the conservatory. I had hoped to meet Mrs. Redfern. Ah, mais non. You will find I am the better listener. Poirot gestured toward a chair. Please sit. March remained standing. If you believe me guilty, why indulge this charade? Poirot's voice was quiet, steady. Because, doctor, you are not a man who kills in hatred. You are a man who kills in fear. And fear, mon cher, leaves traces. On the conscience, yes, but also on the heart. March's hands clenched. You think you understand everything. You don't. Lady Eleanor, she was going to ruin me. She'd found out about the prescriptions I altered, a few harmless alterations, you understand, for patients who could not pay, for medicine I supplied discreetly. She threatened to expose me, to destroy my practice. His voice cracked. I tried to reason with her. Poirot inclined his head, his tone almost compassionate. You feared scandal. You wished to preserve your reputation. So you prepared the poison, yes? March's breathing grew shallow. I only meant to frighten her, to make her ill enough to withdraw her accusations. A few drops, that's all. But she took more than I intended. Poirot's expression did not change. You placed the cyanide on the rim yourself. Yes. The word escaped like a sigh. I told her the glass had been specially cleaned, that it might taste slightly different. She laughed at me, laughed and drank. He pressed a trembling hand to his brow. I didn't mean for her to die. You must believe that. From behind the door, Radley stepped forward, his voice hard. You'll have the chance to explain all that to the magistrate. March turned, startled, his composure collapsing. You've been listening, both of you. You wanted this confession. Poirot's tone was almost regretful. It is the only confession that satisfies the truth, yes. March stared at them for a moment longer, then sank heavily into the chair, his face ashen. I was her physician. She trusted me more than anyone, and I... His voice broke. You don't know what it's like to lose everything for one mistake. Poirot regarded him with grave pity. You speak of mistake, doctor, but you planned it. You measured the poison. You waited for the right moment. There is no accident in such precision, only intention. March lifted his head sharply. And yet you're wrong about one thing. I didn't slip that note under Mrs. Redfern's door. Radley stiffened. What? March's gaze flicked toward Poirot, fierce and sudden. I swear it. I wrote no such thing. Someone wants to pin this on me completely. Someone who fears that my confession might not be the final word. For the first time, Poirot's poise faltered ever so slightly. Comment. You did not write the note? No, March said vehemently. She must have forged it, or someone else did. Poirot's mind worked rapidly, his eyes narrowing as he replayed the morning's events in perfect sequence. The folded note, the wax seal. Red, faintly scented. Yes, there had been a trace of perfume, unmistakably feminine. Mon Dieu, he murmured. How foolish I have been. Radley looked at him in confusion. What is it now? Poirot straightened, his expression sharpening to diamond clarity. The pattern shifts again. There is a second crime in preparation, or perhaps already done. Come quickly, Superintendent. We must find Mrs. Redfern. As they hurried down the corridor, Poirot's voice was low but urgent. Do you not see? She lured him here to buy herself time to act. The truth, she feared, was no longer under her control. They reached the staircase, and from above came the faint echo of breaking glass. A cry, then silence. Poirot broke into a run, Radley close behind. When they reached the landing, the door to Mrs. Redfern's room stood open, the scent of laudanum heavy in the air. On the writing desk lay an overturned bottle, a half-written letter, and beside it the faint glimmer of Lady Eleanor's missing locket. Poirot bent over it slowly, his expression solemn. Ah, he whispered, la pauvre femme, she has chosen her own justice. He straightened, his face grave, the weight of inevitability heavy in his eyes. But even now, my friend, he said softly to Radley, the truth is not finished. There is still one deception left to unravel. The sight before them was one of quiet tragedy. Mrs. Redfern lay slumped across her writing desk, the spilled laudanum spreading in a dark, bitter puddle across the blotter. Her hand still clutched the pen that had begun a final letter, its ink trail ending abruptly in a trembling line. The faint scent of violets from her perfume mingled with the acrid tang of the drug. Poirot stepped forward slowly, his gaze sweeping the room with meticulous care. She has not been gone long, he murmured, touching her wrist gently. The pulse, it flutters still. Bon Dieu, fetch the doctor at once. Radley hesitated. March. Poirot's eyes flashed. Yes, the doctor. He is guilty of much, perhaps, but not of cruelty. Go quickly. While Radley hurried away, Poirot moved about the room, observing every surface as though each were whispering to him. The window was slightly open, letting in the sound of the rain. The writing desk was arranged with its habitual order. The inkstand perfectly aligned, correspondence stacked neatly to one side, and a small porcelain dish holding several keys, one of them gleaming brighter than the rest. Poirot lifted it delicately between his gloved fingers. The cabinet key, he said softly. So she kept it after all. He replaced it and turned to the unfinished letter. The first lines trembled with emotion, the words barely legible. It was not meant to be thus. I only wished to protect the truth, to spare him. But now all is lost. Forgive me, Eleanor. Poirot sighed deeply, folding the page. Mon cher Hastings, he murmured under his breath, invoking his absent friend. You would say it is simple. Guilt and remorse, but non, it is never so simple. She wrote not to excuse herself, but to confess something unspoken. The question is, what truth did she wish to spare? Radley returned with March, who knelt immediately by the desk, his physician's instinct taking command. He worked swiftly, administering a stimulant from his bag. Within minutes, Mrs. Redfern stirred, her eyes fluttering open, her face, drained of color, turned toward Poirot with a faint sound between a sigh and a sob. I thought it would be quieter this way, she whispered. Poirot leaned close, his tone gentle but firm. Madame, it is not yet time for silence. You have still a part to play. Lady Eleanor trusted you with her secrets, did she not? Tears welled in her eyes. She trusted me too much. She thought me incorruptible. And yet you betrayed her, Poirot asked softly. For whom? Her lips trembled. Not for myself. For him. For Henry. March froze where he crouched, the color draining from his face. Agatha, what are you saying? She looked at him with a kind of broken tenderness. I couldn't let her destroy you. She found out about the altered prescriptions. Yes, but worse, she found the letters. the ones you wrote me. She was going to expose everything. I tried to reason with her, but she only smiled that terrible smile and said truth must be served. I thought if I warned her, she might relent, but she never forgave deceit. Poirot's voice remained calm, though his eyes shone with quiet understanding. So you sought to prevent the scandal. You stole the cabinet key, arranged the bottle, and afterward returned it to its place. But it was Dr. March who handled the poison itself. You assisted him, did you not? Her head fell weakly against the chair back. He said it would only make her ill. I believed him. When she fell, when I saw her lips, oh, dear God. March's voice cracked. Agatha, I didn't mean... But Poirot's raised hand silenced him. Non, monsieur. Words of regret cannot undo design. You played upon her devotion, and she, poor woman, believed your assurances. Yet the plan, it seems, was hers as much as yours. She thought to spare you, Doctor. You thought to save yourself. Thus, between love and pride, they built a poison finer than any chemical. Mrs. Redfern's breathing grew faint again. Poirot motioned to Radley. Take her to rest. She will live, though I fear she must face justice in the end. As they carried her away, Poirot remained motionless, gazing into the rain-dimmed garden. His voice was low when he finally spoke. Do you see, Superintendent? It was not greed nor vengeance, but love, misguided, desperate love, that did this. Lady Eleanor was betrayed not by enemies, but by affection. Radley shook his head grimly. They were both in it then. She helped him, he used her, and now one's confessed and the other's near death. It's a tidy case. Poirot turned sharply, his eyes bright as flint. Tidy? No, my friend, it is untidy. There is one more hand in this game. Radley frowned. What are you talking about? There's no one left. Poirot's gaze drifted toward the staircase, where faint footsteps echoed. There is always one who watches, mon ami, one who profits from disorder while pretending innocence. The nephew, perhaps, or the sweet Miss Vale, whose trembling hands conceal more strength than she knows. He took a step toward the hall, his mind already racing ahead. A false note lingers still, and I will find it. Until then, the music does not end. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over London, the sound deep and distant. Poirot paused at the doorway, his silhouette framed against the dim light. Yes, he said softly to himself, the pattern is nearly complete, but not yet perfect. Not until the last deceit stands revealed, and order, at last, is restored. Poirot descended the staircase slowly, his hand trailing lightly along the polished banister. Each step was deliberate, each thought as neatly aligned as his. Movements. The events of the past hours were arranged in his mind like pieces upon a chessboard, each motive, each confession, each deception fitting together almost perfectly. Almost. And yet, as always, there was that faint, persistent discord that refused to be silenced. He had learned to trust such instincts. They were the whisperings of truth waiting to be born. In the drawing-room, Charles Langford stood by the fireplace, staring into the low flames. His handsome features were drawn tight, the confidence of the previous day stripped away. When he heard Poirot's approach, he turned quickly, eyes shadowed with suspicion. "So it's over, then?" he asked, his tone half defiant, half weary. "They've found their culprits. My aunt's loyal companion and her physician. The newspapers will make quite the spectacle of it." Poirot's small hands clasped behind his back. "Mon cher monsieur, you speak as though it were finished. But tell me, do you believe it so simple?" Charles gave a mirthless laugh. "Simple? Nothing about this has been simple since you arrived. But I suppose it satisfies you, order restored, as you like to say." Poirot tilted his head, eyes glimmering with quiet amusement. "Order, yes, but this is not order, non. It is confusion disguised as resolution. Too many things still fail to harmonize. The good lady's locket, for instance." Charles frowned. What about it? Ah, you do not know. It was found beside Mrs. Redfern, clutched almost as though she meant to confess something through it. Yet Lady Eleanor's locket was not merely sentimental. It was practical. Poirot paused, watching the young man closely. It opened, did it not? Charles hesitated. Yes, I believe it did. She kept a photograph inside. Not always, I think, Poirot murmured. Sometimes she kept notes, small folded papers, details one might use in persuasion or defense. What if I tell you the locket contained a list of names? Names connected to her charities, and one in particular that should not have been there. Yours. The young man's composure faltered. Mine? Poirot's gaze was unwavering. Oui, Lady Eleanor discovered discrepancies in her accounts. Money missing, invested unwisely, perhaps gambled away. She meant to confront you last night, publicly, with her glass raised high and the word truth upon her lips. It was not only Dr. March she intended to unmask. Charles' expression hardened. That's a lie. No, it is psychology. Poirot moved closer, his voice softening. When Mrs. Redfern poisoned that glass, she believed she was saving March. But you, my friend, you knew what that toast meant for you as well. You had your own reason to see your aunt silenced. I didn't touch her glass, he burst out. Reeves poured it. I never went near it. Poirot's eyes flickered. Ah, mais oui, you did. For a cigarette case, you said. Left. Conveniently in the conservatory. The same conservatory where the glasses waited, unattended, just long enough for a clever nephew to exchange one flute for another. Charles' breath caught. That's absurd. Is it? Poirot's tone sharpened. When Reeves fetched the bottle, one glass had already been placed at the head of the tray, apart from the rest. You positioned it there yourself, ensuring that when he poured, Lady Eleanor's drink alone would be tainted. The cyanide, how easily obtained, eh? You were close to Dr. March, who kept chemicals in his surgery. A word here, a small theft there, and you had what you needed. Then, when Mrs. Redfern's interference complicated matters, you let suspicion fall naturally upon her. Very neat, very English, très habile. Charles stared at him, color draining from his face. You can't prove any of that. Poirot's smile was faint and terrible. You are mistaken, monsieur. Proof lies not always in things, but in behavior. When Mrs. Redfern was found, what did you do? He faltered. I tried to help. No, Poirot interrupted, his voice now crisp and commanding. You came from your room before anyone else, still in your shirt sleeves, though the alarm had scarcely been raised. How did you know there was need for help, unless you had already been to her room? You went to be certain she had done it, to see that your scapegoat would not rise again to speak. Quelle imprudence! The air seemed to tighten between them. Charles's hands trembled slightly as he turned away, staring into the dying fire. She deserved better, he said hoarsely. Aunt Eleanor ruined everything she touched. She manipulated, humiliated. She made us all her dependents. She wouldn't let me breathe, let me live. And then she said she'd cut me off, publicly, before them all. Poirot's voice softened, almost sorrowful. So you silenced her instead? He said nothing, but his shoulders sagged, and in that silence Poirot heard the answer he needed. Radley entered quietly, reading the tension in the room at once. So it's him, then? Poirot nodded slowly. Oui, mon ami. He poisoned the glass, and the others, poor fools, became his unwitting accomplices. Each played their part in confusion, but only he composed the melody of death. Charles turned sharply, voice thick with fury and despair. You think you understand her, Poirot? That sainted woman was cruel. She treated loyalty as servitude and called it gratitude. I gave her everything, and she looked at me as though I were a beggar at her door. Poirot regarded him sadly. Perhaps yes. She was proud, imperious. But she gave you life, and you repaid her with death. It is not for me to judge your heart, monsieur. But justice, elle, toujours. She demands her due. Radley stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Charles' shoulder. There was no struggle. The young man bowed his head as though the fight within him had burned itself out. When they were gone, Poirot stood alone by the hearth, gazing into the ashes. The rain had stopped, and faint light filtered through the lace curtains. "So," he murmured to the silence, "the circle closes. Love, pride, desperation, each a poison of its own. And yet—" He sighed softly, adjusting his cufflinks with fastidious precision. "It is strange, is it not, how even in tragedy order is restored at last?" He turned toward the door, his steps measured, the faintest echo of melancholy beneath his composure. "Yes," he said quietly, "Lady Eleanor may rest now. The truth at last has had its glass raised to her." The next morning dawned crisp and pale, the rain-washed air carrying a fragile calm over Bloomsbury Square. The heavy tension that had once hung over the Langford residence seemed at last to have lifted, leaving only quiet resignation and the faint scent of jasmine that lingered in the hall. The police had come and gone, leaving the house subdued but no longer watchful. In the morning room, the fire burned low, and Hercule Poirot sat at his ease, a cup of chocolate before him, every crease of his attire immaculate, as though nothing in the world could ever truly discompose him. Superintendent Radley entered, hat in hand, his usually brisk demeanor softened by fatigue. "It's all settled, then," he said. "Langford's confessed in full. He admits to taking the cyanide from March's surgery a fortnight ago, and he's signed a statement. The Crown will have little trouble." Poirot inclined his head gravely. "C'est bien. Justice must be served, though it is a cold comfort to any who loved her." Radley gave a weary shrug. "She made enemies of the lot of them, from what I can tell. Still, you've done it again, Poirot. Another tidy solution." At this, Poirot's eyes glimmered, and a small, enigmatic smile touched his lips. "Ah, mon ami, you speak of tidiness as though it were truth. But truth, she is not always tidy. She is delicate, capricious, like a thread of silk one must draw with care lest it break." Radley frowned. "You're not saying, after all this, that there's more?" Poirot sipped his chocolate and gestured toward the window, where pale sunlight glimmered through the lace. "There is always more, my friend. The nephew poisoned the glass, yes, but who made certain that particular bottle of champagne was chosen? Who ensured the tray was arranged just so?" Radley looked puzzled. "Reeves, Mrs. Redfern supervised—" "Just a minute, Mrs. Redfern." Poirot set down his cup, his eyes bright and sharp again. "When she placed that glass at the head of the tray, she believed herself aiding March. But she knew of the poison before it was poured. She did not prepare it, none. She merely allowed it to be used. The good lady's conscience was already stained before she ever touched the laudanum." Radley exhaled slowly. "So she knew the boy's plan?" Poirot's voice softened. "Not his plan, his intent. She guessed too late that the dose would kill, and then, afterward, when suspicion fell upon her lover, she believed her silence a form of penance. That is why she left the letter unfinished. It was not a confession. It was an apology." He rose then, moving toward the hearth, and for a moment the quiet authority in his manner filled the room. Thus, 3 souls shared in Lady Eleanor's death, one by love, one by fear, and one by pride. The first sought to protect, the second to conceal, and the third to destroy. And between them, a woman who believed herself untouchable learned too late that hearts, like poisons, can be lethal when mixed. Radley shook his head slowly. "You make it sound almost tragic." Poirot smiled faintly. "It is tragic, my friend, always. Murder, you see, is not born of cruelty alone. It grows from weakness, vanity, jealousy, despair. The human heart, mon cher, it is the greatest mystery of all." Outside, a carriage rattled past, scattering the quiet. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his expression serene once more. Lady Eleanor loved order above all things. How ironic that her death should bring it at last. Radley took up his hat. Well, I'll leave you to your reflections, Poirot. Scotland Yard's got the rest in hand. Poirot nodded politely, watching as the door closed behind him. For a long moment he stood alone in the stillness, the ticking clock marking the rhythm of thought. Then, softly, almost to himself, he said, "And so it ends. The garden of orchids is pruned, the poison drawn, and once again the world is, how do they say, put straight." He smiled, the faintest glint of melancholy behind his eyes, and reached for his hat and gloves. As he passed the great mirror in the hall, he paused to adjust his tie with exquisite precision. "Eh bien," he murmured with quiet satisfaction, "the little grey cells, they have done their duty." Outside, the pale light of morning caught the brim of his hat as he descended the steps. The city beyond Bloomsbury Square stirred into life, unaware of the human drama played out behind its dignified facades. Poirot paused once at the gate, casting a final glance back at the house, and then, with a soft hum of contentment, stepped into his waiting cab. The driver tipped his cap. "Where to, sir?" Poirot settled comfortably, his gaze turning toward the bustling streets. "To Whitehaven Mansions," he said. "It is time, I think, for breakfast and a little peace, n'est-ce pas?" As the carriage rolled away through the misty London morning, the detective's reflection shimmered faintly in the window, serene, composed, and utterly inscrutable. The case of the poisoner of Bloomsbury Square was closed, and though justice had been served, Poirot knew, as he always did, that beneath the calm surface of human order, the depths of the heart would forever remain untidy, 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 remain untidy.